Up next, we have Quincy Jones. Yeah, I thought that too, not that Quincy Jones, it's a different one. Quincy Jones is a software developer at XinFin, and he'll talk about how different online economies, what they will look like if they adopt cryptocurrencies and other assets, and the ecosystems that could develop around them. Okay? Quincy.
Hey everybody, so I'm Quincy Jones, of course, not that one, but I'm here today to talk to you guys about the future of digital assets and digital ownership rights. Now, before I really get into my presentation, I kind of want to address something. So it seems like there's sort of this sentiment in the crypto space that digital assets or NFTs or a lot of these tokens are just cute, cat pictures on the internet. Funny enough, it seems as if the internet sort of gets its root from cute cat pictures. Social media, YouTube, seems like it all started that way. But I think I can really get a chance to articulate some of the real utility that these tokens, or the tokenization of these products or assets, or whatever you want to call them, can really change the game in terms of, well, the future adoption of, well, digital ecosystems, distributed ledgers, and, well, the future of automation for, well, different enterprises in the future. So let's get into it. So first, what are NFTs? Like I said, a lot of people seem to think that these are cute cat pictures on the internet. But in reality, these are just unique digital objects that reside on the decentralized ledger that allow to show for ownership rights of the items that they may consist of. And I have a couple examples here showing, they can represent titles, whether it's the title of a car or a home. They can be the representation of digital content, whether it's audio, visual, pictures, like I said, cat pictures. They can also show digital rights like intellectual property rights, copyright, patents, all these different unique things. Hell, they can even show IDs, tickets, really showing ways that you can tokenize other items to really signify a mechanism to use on these decentralized networks. And last, I also have NFT licenses, including SaaS softwares and smart contracts. And also, I'll get into the future, well, what I call smart equities, smart contract equities. But let's dive even more into it too, because I think I have a lot more to say about NFTs also. So not only can they show property rights, but they also can have different utilities about them. I have a few up here showing like an NFT pass token, maybe be able to tokenize different, whether it's a password or a key, or even as an ID, as I stated before. Or maybe you want to have a token to represent an item through a supply chain to be able to really have a better native way to track these items through whatever sort of business enterprise you may have. I also have these NFTs can really show the representation of a retail sale by being able to have a person natively buy whatever they're trying to buy, through a retail shop as an NFT to show the ownership of the thing they just purchased, on top of being able to show the integrity of the item, showing that it actually came from the provider that you're buying it from, even if it's from a secondhand user. There's a lot of counterfeit things out there. You want to make sure that you have the official, the official item that you're actually trying to buy and not a counterfeit. But what more can we go into this? Well, when it comes to the XRP ledger and digital economies, NFTs, I think we can really show what these ecosystems could look like. And I have a diagram up here showing you kind of the 3 different segments of tokenization. One being currencies, and those would consist of not only fiat currencies, but also cryptocurrencies. Second, I have assets, which not only illustrate traditional financial assets, but also potential future crypto assets. Like I said, crypto equities. And then again, I have NFT products, which can really be a representation of anything, but it's just a native mechanism of being able to show what an item is on these decentralized networks to be able to exchange these different items. Now, one example I used to give for how these ecosystems can coexist with each other and sort of, I guess you could say, interact, is let's say you had an online store, right? And normally when you have an online store, you have your products, you have your payment mechanism, and you may have an automation to how you're able to show these products, sell these products, and so on. So how can we have a digital store on a decentralized network that can not only illustrate NFTs, have a native payment mechanism, but also really be backed by a series of digital assets that we haven't really seen before? So let's take a decentralized eBay, for example, right? Now, in a traditional sense, whenever you list something online on eBay, for instance, that data that you're listing is standing in a couple databases. And you may have your application that may actually showcase the app eBay in that scenario. And when it comes to actually being able to exchange goods, there's a lot of siloed data to be able to allow for that exchange. And an example of that is somebody made a purchase for something. Well, you can see that someone purchased this, and you may issue them a receipt. But then you've also got to go in the back end and tell the database, hey, someone bought this. So you got to delist the thing that they bought, and if there's multiple items, you got to make sure you keep track of that. Well, with decentralized assets, what you can do is the items in your store can be tokenized, the representation of that item that you're listing for sale. Now, you can have your native payment mechanism, currencies, cryptocurrencies, and you can use that native payment mechanism to show the transfer of ownership rights from an item you just bought on the store. So if you have 10 items on the store, you have 10 NFTs representing them. People buy those 10 NFTs, you no longer have those items in the store because the rights that have been associated to the items that they bought have already been purchased. It allows for very easy, I guess you could say easy accounting for being able to manage those. Now, where do digital assets come into this? Well, in order to run your store, you may have a collection of other smart contracts, or maybe you may compile your application or your application, decentralized application, in such a manner to be able to list these items and for people to buy them. Well, what about this decentralized application you may have is this application will allow for, people to interact with it to be able to buy the goods, but when people are buying the goods, there may be people who own the backend application, whether that be a smart contract or a structured DApp you may have. So one thing you may end up having is the more people that use that store, that use that application, they could actually have shareholders in that application. That shareholder can be represented as an NFT for the broader app that you just build or whatever. And in doing so, you're actually able to have people who may invest in their early creation of the application get paid based off the performance of that app. Now, when it comes to the XRP decentralized, these XRP decentralized economies, we can look at a few things here. So one thing I really like about the XRPL is you'll end up getting this maximum liquidity amongst items. So let's go back to the assets, for example. Due to a function called rippling, you can actually have a high level of liquidity between liquid assets to be able to buy, whether it's an item on a store, be able to do very easy exchanges. And it's one of those things where nothing like this has ever been able to exist before, where you can take sort of an abstract value of an item, whether it's stock, a bond, treasury note, milk derivatives, and you can essentially have easy liquidity into currencies to be able to buy certain items on these decentralized stores, whether it's a product or whether it's a representation of a home, like I said before when it comes to the titles, or it can be just something as simple as buying a toothbrush. All it is just a mechanism to be able to have high liquidity into buying those different assets. Now, one thing that I find really interesting about the XRPL is it's also a decentralized exchange. So being able to have that easy access between these different assets becomes incredibly simple because instead of having to build out your own mechanism to be able to exchange these assets, it's sort of cooked in natively into the network. And it's one of those things where I don't think it gets a lot of the attention it deserves because, most people don't really care about exchanges. But at least from my perspective, it's one of the most core, integrable applications that this network is able to provide that can really change the game in terms of how people are able to transact assets on these networks. So let's go into more. Well, dApps and their token economy. So I gave that example of the online store, but why would someone use your store? Why would someone use your dApp? And I don't think this gets a lot of attention because people just assume if you just build an application, if I build it, they will come. And as a software developer, I can tell you that's not always the case. You got to have reasons why people would want to use them. So I kind of broke this down into, as you could say, 4-ish reasons. And that comes down to incentives, risk rewards, and penalties. So let's move on to something a little bit more complex, like a peer-to-peer credit lending, or I could say equity lending, a peer-to-peer lending app, right? Well, you may have incentives for people to be able to lend out money to other participants as an interest rate. Simple enough. People are able to lend out money from one person to another, and they're able to get their reward based off the completion of that payment with the interest rate. Now, there's a risk with that, because obviously, not everyone pays 100% of the time. As you may have noticed, you had your friend borrow $5 and never got it back. So, in terms of building these dApp ecosystems, you need to have essentially penalties to be able to compensate the network for a loss in value. Now, people usually think of penalties as sort of a, I'm going to punish you for not doing this, but it's sort of a mixture between a disincentive mechanism and I guess you could say it's a disincentive mechanism on top of a way to compensate the network for the loss of value due to a lack of participation or fault in one of the participants. So, in the example I gave for the peer-to-peer lending app, let's say I lent out $100, and I had a 2% interest rate, so I'm expecting $102 back. But I only got $50 back. Well, one way I can essentially have a disincentive mechanism or a way to compensate the network is maybe I had them put up a $20 deposit. So yeah, they pay me $50, maybe I take the $20 deposit, and I'm sitting there with $70 in terms of value that I'm able to accumulate. Well, in doing that, you're able to have a method in which, in some regard, if something were to fail, some part of that interaction gets compensated. Now, it's not a perfect system, but the idea is if you can have a certain way to compensate users on the network, if any value is lost, you can essentially subside that with, well, like I said, in this scenario, a deposit. And this goes for really any app. When you build something, you want people to have incentives to use it. There's going to be risk rewards in how they use it. And it can be something as simple like the eBay store. The incentive to use it is you can buy something, but the risk is you may not get it. And one thing I stated before about the NFTs is, on a traditional store, if you don't get a product, it may be a pain in the butt to be able to prove that you bought the product. As an NFT, you can prove that you own the item at the same time being able to see that you didn't get it, which makes, I guess you could say, litigation or enforcement over this a lot easier because you're able to prove that you have this. And I think it's something interesting to talk about because I don't think there are a lot of software developers out there really talking about why people would use these different applications they may build. And it's not something most people are really concerned with, but I'm concerned with it, mostly because I build apps, and I would like to see other people build apps too. So let's get more into it. So let's talk about smart contract, hooks, and interledger bridges. One thing that we're going to see in the future in terms of adoption for these different decentralized ledgers is interoperability. Now, the reason why this is key is in order for people to build applications to really maximize the utility of what their application is able to do, they need to be able to utilize features from different networks. There's two reasons for this. One, you can build more elaborate and, I guess you could say, have access to more participants in doing so. But also, if you operate on one network and a partner of yours operates on another network, you can very easily have that interoperability without having the siloed problem of trying to figure out how we're able to communicate. Now, in this diagram I listed here, I actually showed an example of how you can have an interoperable connection between two networks. One being the XCC network, and the other being the XRPL. Now, this is a very simplistic version of this, but the whole idea is if you can essentially have an application be able to execute functions on another network, or at the very least have the ability to read functions from another network, you can actually allow for a better interoperability and a better pool of participants that you're able to sort of pull from. So let's say I was primarily working on the XCC network with my smart contract, but I want to be able to tap into the participants running on the XRP ledger. Well, that means I need to have some sort of bridge of interoperability to be able to have those people that are operating on the XRP ledger to have access to my application, and vice versa. Interoperability doesn't go one way. It's a two-way street, literally. But one thing I really want to hammer home in here is interoperability is an absolute necessity into the future. And I almost believe that if these certain applications don't have interoperability, well, they're almost no different than some of the applications we may use today, like Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, for those who know what that is. But it's something that I think should get a lot more attention than it actually does, because it seems like people seem to be focused exclusively this network, that network, this network, that network. People think that it's going to be one to rule them all, but in reality, it's going to be them all to connect with them all. Or the ones that can't, I don't know if they'll be able to make it. Not saying that they won't, but interoperability is very important to be able to really scale and really be able to utilize the features that these technologies have to offer. So let's get more into it. So I built out an application here, and I spoke on this earlier about smart contract equities. Now, I think this is a new, not so new topic, but I think it's a topic that people really don't talk about because I don't think people know what these are. And I'll tell you right now, I think smart contract equities will essentially not destroy the stock market, but essentially outgrow it, outpace it, expand beyond a level that we can even comprehend due to the barrier of entry. So what I mean by a smart contract equity or a DApp equity of some sort. So I architected two diagrams here, one on the XRP ledger and one on the XDC blockchain, to really show what something like this could look like. So I've got this hooks renter DApp, right? And essentially the renter is able to pay a certain amount of payment, whatever they need, to a certain address to really represent their payment to, the rent. Well, in doing so, there may be investors that may have, put in the capital to actually build the property. There may be investors that may have been part of the original contractors to really set everything up. There may be multiple parties involved. So in doing so, just like in equity, every single time a payment is made, the profit from that payment can be used as a dividend to the original shareholders. And I actually have this outlined as multiple addresses. Now, I also architected another one on the XDC network because it seems like a lot of people have like this one way of thinking and how things could work, but I wanted to show that it really doesn't matter how you build it. What matters is if it gets the job done. So I've got two totally different methods of doing this, one with XRP Ledger and hooks, and one with the XDC network and smart contracts and NFTs. This actually goes into my second topic about NFT equities, because if you had an NFT represented as the original smart contract, and that NFT was split up amongst the different beneficiaries or the original investors, you can potentially see that a proportion of the profits that are generated from the DApp can be allocated appropriately based off of the revenue generated from the original application, on top of the individuals that are able to hold these tokens being able to be compensated based off of the performance. They can sell these tokens, and the person that they sold it to can very easily have a native mechanism of getting dividends solely based off the automated process that this contract's able to provide. And it's, like I said, it's going to change the world, because if you wanted to create a traditional equity, well, for one, you have to set up a company, you have to hire all these people, and even if you wanted to create something simple like a lemonade stand and issue dividends off that, you still need all of these different middlemen to be able to account for the money, make sure that everything is being filed correctly in terms of making sure the money gets to who it needs to get to, and there's just a lot of friction in that. With a lot of these decentralized technologies, that friction almost becomes obliterated. Anybody with an idea and a little bit of programming experience, or a buddy with some programming experience, could very easily build out an application that can essentially do the same thing that a traditional equity could do. And that changes everything, because now the barrier of entry becomes almost anybody. You don't necessarily have to be this, corporate, takeover CEO that's trying to come in and, build up your company and do all these different things. You could very easily build a simple application like an online store or a realty app to be able to have renters pay into, or tenants pay into their rent on that, whatever it may be. And you're able to very easily sort of bridge the gap between the application being used and the people who invested in that application. And I think what that could end up doing is it can actually bring a lot more capital to applications that very much could exist and very easily have a greater return than the alternative as a traditional equity, mostly because this system is entirely programmatic. That's kind of the beauty of these things, is you're able to create these programmatic, interoperable systems that are able to be self-regulating. And like I said, nothing like this has really been able to exist before. But I don't know, I think this is going to be one of the biggest things to really change the world in terms of digital economies, automation, equities, and really how people interact with the internet. Because what this allows you to do too is, because you're able to have these different tokens represented in different ways, or these applications represented in different ways, anybody can invest. Like I said, you don't have to be this great stockbroker, whatever, go onto the stock market or go onto the equity markets and really try to participate. Anybody with an internet connection can very easily invest in whatever DApp they want, or at the very least participate in the creation of any DApp that they want. And one thing I like to sort of encourage is, I think people can do this. You don't need to be a big brain genius, programmer, developer to do this. You just need to have an idea, a will, a way, and just like there are multi-billion-dollar equities, well, there are going to be potentially multi-trillion-dollar smart equities. So, now, what are the future of digital assets? Now, I spoke on a few things beforehand, but there are a few things I really want to hammer home. So, I spoke about different types of NFTs, and one thing I think would be quite interesting as a good example of what we could do with these is globally recognized passports. Now, imagine this. Imagine country A simply just recognizing the NFTs generated from country B. Well, the idea of having these counterfeit IDs and people moving across borders can become significantly streamlined, and not to mention a bit more frictionless rather than having a whole bunch of people sort of evaluating a bunch of paper documents under the guise that, I hope you didn't just, counterfeit this and print this in your back office. But it'll also allow for people to sort of participate in a global setting a little bit easier, because it can be something as simple as scanning a QR code on your phone to not only authenticate you as an individual from a certain country, but even authenticate you as an individual from a certain state, whether it's an ID, whether it's a passport, or whether it's even something as simple as a security clearance. These are just very simple native mechanisms that can allow for people to, engage with each other. And that's really where it comes down to a lot of these network technologies. They're really different methods and different tools of engagement that are sort of natively cooked into how these networks operate. And in doing so, and them being native to these networks, it makes it not only easier to engage with, but easier to develop on too. I've had quite a bit of experience in cloud development, and I can tell you, trust me, I can tell you, some of the stuff that seems simple is very much not. And some of the stuff when it comes down to managing becomes significantly more difficult in terms of trying to manage how you're going to build out your network, your databases, your servers, whatever that may be. And with these decentralized networks, it's almost like the entire operations of those networks become, decentralized. Everybody out there with the node is help supporting your network in such a manner, or help supporting your application in such a manner, to where you don't need to worry about a simple failure here or a simple failure there, or even just a cruddy internet connection with your service provider really bringing down your application. And it really shows you that you can scale these applications almost infinitely, because, like I said, if you're doing this in, whether it's the cloud, every time someone needs to come onto your app, you may need to, allocate more resources to them. What these decentralized networks are able to essentially have those resources on demand ready to go. Now, what's another one of these future digital assets that we could see? Well, I've said this before, NFT smart contract marketplaces, smart equities. Now, I think, like I said, I think this is gonna essentially take over the equities market, because instead of, and like I said, we see these marketplaces in terms of these cute cat picture marketplaces for NFTs. What if we had a NFT equities market that would allow for anybody, just like you can go buy a CryptoKitty, buy a stake in an automation platform, whether it's simply a smart contract that does a back-end process, whether it's the broader dApp of whatever you're trying to build, you can essentially allow for anybody to invest in the future automation of, the new decentralized internet. And it's one of those things where I have to hammer this, I really have to hammer this in. It will change the game forever. I'm telling you, it will change everything. So let's get into my last one here, NFT product ownership. And I said this at the beginning, that you can really show, you can show NFTs as a way of representing ownership over different objects. But it's not just object A or object B. In the future, it may be everything. Everything that you could potentially possess will have an NFT associated with it to really show what the ownership rights of that object may be. And it may sound silly, like, hey, yeah, Quincy, I get it. I bought a toothpick on the internet, and I have an NFT for it showing I own it. It's not just that goofy, it's everything. So like I said, if you bought something from an online store and you're expecting it, well, one way you can prove that you bought it is, hey, I have the NFT for it. And that I have the NFT for it shows that I went through the process of buying this asset, whatever it is, whether it's an item, a toothpick, it could be a smart contract, it could be whatever. You can prove that you own it. And everything will be like that, whether it's a toothpick, a dApp, your clothes, your house, anything. But one thing I really want to hammer home for everybody, to really get your mind thinking on, sorry about that, my mouth is dry, to really get your mind thinking on what could these future ecosystems look like? Well, I think all you really need to do is just turn to yourself. Hey, all of you have an expertise in something. everybody has an expertise in something. You don't just know nothing. Everybody knows something. But is there a way that I could utilize what I already know more efficiently, more effectively, faster, cheaper, more natively? I bet there is. And it's one of those things where, like I said before, you don't need to be a big brain engineered whatever to be able to figure these things out. It's more of just understanding how could I utilize these digital tools to really get the most out of my enterprises? And how can I utilize these digital networks, and not just one, but really any of them, how can I utilize these digital networks to really get the broader amount of, I guess you could say, application development / application utility with something I already do. You could be an accountant out there. Well, I bet there's something out there you can do in terms of decentralized assets and being able to take account for different objects. Hey, maybe you're a supply chain manager. I bet there's different ways that you can go about, utilizing these digital assets to be able to keep track of these of your supply chain. Let's say you're a realtor. There's definitely a way that you can really show a way you could automate the ownership rights and the transactions between two parties in regards to realty and being able to sell properties. Or maybe you're just a baker with a website and you realize, hey, if I build my website or hire someone to build my website on these decentralized platforms, maybe it'll be a lot easier to manage. I'm already managing this website now, and I had a very crazy cupcake go viral or whatever, and the website went down. Well, these networks don't go down. That's kind of the beauty of these. And it's one of those things where in this talk, I hope I'm able to sort of expand the public's consciousness in a way for people to really build on their own ideas with these networks in such a manner that could change the world. Because, like I said, anybody can change the world. But that's really all I have for tonight. Thank you.